Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We're going to allow folks just another minute or two to file in. Thank you for joining us this morning, this afternoon. Good morning, everybody. If you're just joining, we're going to allow folks another minute or two to join us. I'm Mason, and I'm the community manager at Blueprint. Thank you all for joining this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are. I think we'll go ahead and get started. As I said, I'm Mason. I'm the community manager here at Blueprint, and we're very excited to have a behind the scenes conversation with two clinicians at Blueprint developing and using AI in mental health. Before we dive into the content, wanted to share that the conversation today is being hosted in partnership between Blueprint and Heard, two innovative organizations serving therapists in private practice. Blueprint is an AI assistant for therapists. Our tools automate progress notes, draft smart treatment plans, and surface actionable insights before, during, and after every session. And Heard is the only financial platform built for private practice. Therapists and wellness practitioners save time and money with accounting software designed to manage and grow your practice. A couple notes on housekeeping before we get any further. You'll see an option to add any questions you might have through the Q&A feature. So the chat is not enabled, but we do have Q&A enabled. Our speakers, as well as myself and a couple folks on the Blueprint team, will do their best to answer questions throughout the discussion, in addition to some topics we have in mind already. And while we do hope you hang out for the duration of today's conversation, the conversation is being recorded and will be shared with everyone who RSVP'd for today's event. Want to share a couple options to get to know Blueprint a little more. So there's a couple QR codes here that you'll see. On the left is a special offer for folks who haven't started using Blueprint. We're offering 50% off your first purchase for the next 30 days for as little as, I think, 29 cents per session. So scan the code with your phone, take out the phone, open your camera, focus on the QR code, and it'll pull up a website and click through to access the offer. On the right, for folks feeling the weight of not having a therapist community, we've built one. Our digital community, which is called Between Sessions, is a trusted, intimate space for therapists to connect, share insights, and support one another in what can often be challenging and isolating work. So if you're interested in accessing more sessions like this, or joining a free case consultation group, or connecting with about 400 of your peers from across the country, we'd love to have you join us in the community. And again, use your phone, open the camera, and scan the QR code there on the right. Now, I couldn't be more excited to welcome you and our speakers to a conversation designed to be candid, revealing, and actionable. AI helps therapists save time, reduces documentation stress, and surfaces insights that can improve client outcomes. But it also raises important questions about privacy, ethics, and how to maintain the heart of the therapeutic relationship. So, this discussion has been crafted in an effort to help you navigate this fast changing landscape. We'll talk about the basics of AI, privacy, data security, how to use AI in your practice, benefits like reducing cognitive load, saving money, and much more. And so, to cover all of that, we're very lucky to be joined by two of Blueprint's clinical experts who are working with AI every day. We have Anne DiPianco, who's a clinician and mental health content expert with more than 15 years of experience in psychotherapy, supervision, and clinical review. She's the co-editor of Therapist Brief, a wonderful newsletter. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and serves as the clinical community lead at Mental Health Match. She's also worked extensively in QA and documentation review with organizations such as Grow Therapy. At Blueprint, Anne is a clinical content creator and quality assistance lead and was the first user of our forthcoming AI-assisted EHR and the AI clinical assistant. She brings a practical perspective of a therapist who uses AI in her own day-to-day practice every day. Good morning, Anne. Welcome.
Thank you. You made me sound so good. My self-esteem just shot up. So thank you, Mason. I'm so excited to be here.
You are so good. I'm happy to hear that. Is there anything I missed or anything you wanted to share about your clinical background or maybe how you've been integrating AI in your practice just briefly here?
Yeah, sure. So I have a very small practice at this point. I'm telehealth only. So I live in Montana, but my practice is based in California where I used to live. And I'll say that I ended up somehow I have a lot of therapists on my caseload, and so I feel like the extra pressure to maintain ethical compliance and role modeling is very strong for me because I really live in fear of people's judgment. So I'm very excited to talk today.
Thank you, Anne. Very helpful context there. Appreciate that. Our second speaker is Vivian Chung Easton, and she's a clinical product leader and licensed therapist with deep experience in quality improvement, compliance, and insurance auditing across organizations, including Headway, Grow Therapy, and federal public health initiatives. As Blueprint's clinical product lead, Vivian uses her clinical background and expertise in prompt engineering to build the guardrails that keep our AI tools safe, compliant, and clinically aligned. And she also hosts a clinical product and AI series where she and many others explore the research and safeguards behind responsible AI in therapy. Good morning, Vivian. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Super happy to have you. Same question. Did I miss anything, or is there anything about your current role or your background that you'd like to share with the group?
So I've been with Blueprint for a while and have kind of seen the entire life cycle of our note taker product. And so I'm really excited to talk more about it, and explore more about how we can make sure that this is like a safe product for everyone to use.
Amazing. Thank you. And maybe a word on your background in compliance
Yeah, so
and
I'm
as a
certified.
clinician.
So I'm certified in healthcare compliance. I've also practiced the past like decade, mostly in like the nonprofit world with children, family. And so I'm very familiar with just like healthcare compliance in the federal space and the insurance space, in general.
Fantastic. Super helpful context there. And last question for now, of course. You and Anne bring complementary strengths. Will you walk us through what you see those as and how that might shape this conversation?
I can go first, and so I think one of the key things that's really important to me is while I'm building kind of the back end stuff that has to do with more of the tech stuff, the engineering stuff, it's really important to have that clinical expertise that's actually practicing and using it. And everyone's workflows are so different, and so having that perspective from different providers and practicing providers really helps me to further understand kind of how um, the breadth of the tool that the tool needs to cover.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think for me, if I can, I'm most excited to hear from Vivian today because even though I use the product and I'm on the other end of the equation, I don't really know or understand what she does. And one time she shared her computer screen with me and it was crazy. The words were so small and it just felt so overwhelming and detail oriented. And so I couldn't wrap my head around it then, but I'm excited to learn how it works today.
Amazing. Both clinicians, Vivian behind the scenes, a little more so working on the technical stuff, building AI. We'll talk about that in a second. And Anne doing a lot of content, but also working day to day in a practice, implementing a lot of the features and products that we're all creating together in your practice. So a wonderful spread there to cover the wide range of practices that Vivian suggested as well. Thank you both very much for joining today. I think as many folks in the room already know, I'm Mason. I'm Blueprint's community manager, and I support therapists through education and conversations about the responsible use of AI, including through moderation of our digital community and events like this one. So that's a little bit about us, but we also want to get to know you. We have several polls lined up for the conversation to help us learn more about you and for you to get a sense of how your peers are engaging with AI. The first of which is about your familiarity with AI and clinical practice. So you should see a poll now. Feel free to engage with that and give us a sense about your familiarity with AI in clinical practice. Heard about it, experimented a little bit with, for example, ChatGPT, some more general, non-mental health specific AI tools. Occasionally use AI in your workflows as a therapist or mental health clinician, or use them regularly. Okay, fantastic. Got a lot of folks answering here. Can she see that most folks have occasional use, and some folks using AI tools regularly and feeling comfortable with them? Fantastic. That's very helpful for myself, for Vivian and Anne, and also I think, imagine, hopefully for all of you to understand who else is in the room. So let's get into it. And wanted to start with how AI is built and taking us from a bit of the beginning. I know a lot of folks are familiar and even comfortable, but doesn't hurt to review some basics. As we mentioned, Vivian is building a lot of these tools. So we're going to start with you, Vivian. For those of us who are maybe a little newer to AI or may need a refresher, can you explain in simple terms what a prompt is and how it drives output?
Yeah, absolutely. So prompts are essentially like a set of instructions. Now, if you think back to like your elementary school education, I'm sure many of you have been asked to create a list of instructions on how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich, right? You first get the bread, you first get the jam, the peanut butter, and so it's very specific in the list of instructions that you give it. So imagine your AI is a toddler you're giving instructions to. Any step you miss, it may or may not bridge that gap. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So it's important to be as specific as possible. Um, Maybe not a toddler, maybe like a third grader. So it's got a little bit of common sense, but you still want to be like a little bit more specific in order to get the output that you want.
That's helpful. Also seeing your parenthood shine through here in the PB&J. I tell me a bit more about the design of the prompts. I'm hearing specificity being really important, and that like it can bridge some gaps if you miss it in the instructions. Anything else about the design that helps produce clinically accurate notes?
Yeah, so we definitely will explore that a little bit more as we go into the webinar today. But as to preface it a little bit, we essentially designed the prompts so that it meets the basic clinical requirements, and it's all within the prompt on how you ask it to phrase certain things. Things to keep in mind of are very insurance specific things or very medical things, very clinical things. We wanted to think like a therapist. We wanted to think like a prescriber and not as a medical doctor, for example.
Mm,
Those are important distinctions because someone as a therapist writing their therapy notes are very different than a psychiatric provider. A psychiatric provider, the way they write their notes are also very different from a medical doctor. And so there's some foundations that need to be laid out in the prompt design process.
that's helpful. It strikes me as like it's a certain perspective It's the specificity combined with a certain perspective or point of view, in this case being the therapist, that's taken into account in creating or designing these prompts.
Exactly.
A big concern that I imagine we'll talk about more later as well in the privacy security section potentially is data training. Can you explain why Blueprint and maybe some potentially other organizations aren't training the model on therapist or client data, and maybe even like what that means to train the model?
Yeah. So data training essentially is using your data without your explicit um, consent as the action piece to inform how the model behaves. And you would, for example, give it a list of terms that you use all the time, and the model will then learn that you are supposed to use these terms when creating your output because those are the terms that you've deemed are important. Now, Blueprint doesn't necessarily do that in the sense that every single note is a standalone. However, there are functions in Blueprint which is meant to bridge the gap between client context that does use your past notes, but that's because you've asked it to. So we have
Mhm.
things like memory, so it remembers kind of your style. We have the idea that we want the model to remember your client's spouse's occupation or your client's how many children your client has. Those are things, but you have to actually explicitly say, I want you to remember these things. If you don't do any of that, each note is a standalone, which is great in the sense that we don't use your data to train in any way, but may not be as great if you are hoping to create a consistent clinical image of your client, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's really helpful. What I'm hearing here is like consent. And without it, each note is standalone. It's kind of a blank slate because you hadn't consented to the model remembering the number of children a client has or their spouse's name, for example. You can opt into that such that you can train it in that sense, but that's not the default.
Exactly. Yeah, it's something you have to say, yes, I do want the model to recall this information, and then it will kind of carry it forward.
Very helpful. Thank you for that. And kind of shifting gears a little bit into how this looks in the real world, there's a concern I think that we've all heard that's about whether AI is here to replace therapists. When you hear that, either from your clients who are therapists or from peers, or maybe even ask yourself this, how do you respond? What goes through your mind?
Yeah, I think that it's when we look at AI and mental health, that it's really there's a fork in the road. So that there are products that are marketing themselves as AI therapists and AI companions. And I believe that that type of product, I don't know, I don't work for one of those companies, would be probably using data to train their models,
Hmm.
data from client sessions. But then there's also a very different category of AI tools like Blueprint, like other scribe companies that are designed to support clinicians, not replace them. So they offer support through helping with documentation, session prep, decision support, administrative workload, that sort of thing. So I think it's important when you have that conversation to separate those two different types of companies, and there's probably more that I might not be aware of. But the more I read and research about this, I actually think that AI might expand the role of therapist, not eliminate it. Maybe just create new types of jobs. Like Vivian's job and my job here at Blueprint didn't exist 10 years ago. ChatGPT has talked about hiring therapists, in their product. They haven't yet, but yeah, the possibilities are endless. We don't know where this is going to go, but yeah, I think like most people in the audience, I don't believe that anything can replace a human relationship. I don't think anything should replace a human relationship, and that is, I think, a widely held belief across humans and humanity.
Yeah, I love that. I share that belief. I agree and imagine many folks in the audience do as well. I appreciate the distinction you drew at the beginning of the two, roughly two camps of organizations working in the AI and mental health space, that being AI therapists, companies building tools that are intended or designed to some degree to replace, not support therapists. Those are AI therapists. And then also in another camp, tools that support or designed to support clinicians and not replace them. So I think you're right. Like that distinction matters to kind of set the table and have a conversation that is specific enough to make some progress and and connect on what we're talking about exactly. Thank you for that. Anything else either of you want to say on how AI is built or anything foundational here?
Not really. I don't know if Vivian does. She's the one building.
I think we're going to dig into a lot more of this as we go, so we'll kind of go from there.
Sounds good. Let's turn it over to the audience again. We have another poll about how you're using AI today. Sounds like most of you are. So let's get a little more specific there. The question is, which of the following best describes how you currently use AI, if at all? And for this one, you can select multiple options. Starting with, I don't use AI at all yet. I use general AI tools like ChatGPT for a couple administrative tasks. And then the third option here for clinical documentation or note support. And then scrolling down, I use a specialized mental health AI product. And at the very bottom, AI for personal use only. I'll give folks just a minute or so or 30 seconds more. All right, and you can see the results here. Very few not using AI at all, followed by the last answer, AI for personal use only. So a lot of folks using it in their practice. The majority or most folks doing using general AI tools like chat for administrative tasks, followed by general AI tools for clinical documentation or note support, and then finally specialized mental health AI product. Okay, very interesting spread there. Thank you all for sharing that. And a good segue to what we want to talk about next, clinical integrity, security, and privacy. So if you are using AI in your practice, which it sounds like most folks are, how do we do it responsibly? And a few topics within that, integrity, security, and privacy. Vivian, I want to start with you. We saw from the response that a lot of folks are using general tools like ChatGPT. Uh, I've heard about this. It's accessible. There's a free version. It works really well for a lot of tasks. Um, I think folks are even using it for notes and treatment plans, as we've seen. Curious if you think there's anything wrong with this, if there's anything that folks should have in mind as they're thinking about doing this. Talk to us about these general GPTs.
Yeah. Yeah, so ChatGPT is great. I use it in my everyday life. I would say that if you are using it to create notes or treatment plan, the best way to go about it is creating a mock treatment plan without giving it a lot of information. So you would say something like, I have a client who is diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. Give me a smart treatment plan. That might be a good way of going about it. What it does become dicey is when you give it specific client information or specific progress notes that you've written or any piece of client data that might be that might identify a client in and use that in GBT. Now, the question is also, what if they de-identify the client's info?
Right.
Coming from a compliance background, you would be surprised at how much is considered identifying info. So everyone goes through like a HIPAA training when you a yearly HIPAA training as like a licensed medical professional, but the list that you can use to identify a client just keeps growing every year there's like a little bit more, and every year I get at least one question wrong on the survey, which is like, out of these things, which are PHI? And you would think something isn't, unless, once you've kind of blocked it out, but it actually is. So there's just so much that people can do with data now that unless you have a service that is specialized for what you, especially when it comes to like medical data, I would just err on the side of caution.
That's really helpful. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if are there examples of that list that are like surprising PHI that you're like, oh wow, like cannot believe the computer or whoever put that together and moved from de-identified to identifiable.
Yeah, I would say, I can't remember off the top of my head, but something would be like the occupation. For
Mm,
example, a school janitor is too specific, but a sanitary professional is less,
mm.
which you would think is the same thing, but a school janitor, you can narrow down, right? You can narrow down who it is and all that stuff, even sanitary professionals and all that stuff. So it's just the list grows because we also have more tools to go about figuring stuff out. It's no longer just, okay, if I have your name, date of birth, social security number, it's just there's so much information out there now in this digital age that it's easier to figure out information, not as a human, but even as the other AIs that are able to figure out your information.
It's a great point that, even if we can't think of it, like the obvious one, social security number, first car model, like there's
Yeah.
so much data that can map it together that we couldn't as humans do. What about Blueprint and how we protect PHI? What's the difference between something like a mental health specific tool versus ChatGPT, a general AI tool?
Yeah, so we at Blueprint, a mental health specific tool, all the software, all the services we use, there's a business, like a business agreement that you have to sign beforehand, which secures all of the data. You and ChatGPT do not have this. So yes, you can consent to this, but the data is still out there. The difference is that as a business, you have a business association agreement from a compliance standpoint that binds the two businesses together, that secures your data. Has to go with all. I can't go into the technical of security and data, but that's the foundational of that. If
Very
that's helpful.
helpful. Yeah, thank you. Anne, over to you. I'm curious from,
Can I ask a follow-up question to Vivian first? Sorry.
yes, please.
Okay, so I do know that ChatGPT, like the whole de-identification thing, but if it's okay, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I was thinking about previously we were talking about data training models and stuff, and I was wondering, is like, can ChatGPT train their models based on like if I type in a treatment plan or
Mm,
write a de-identified note? What's
So I have heard different things. One where have you ever noticed that when you use ChatGPT, it just becomes more and more efficient because it starts to get to know your style. So
right?
essentially, it's using your information to tailor make your assistant for you, right? So it's like, okay, I know your style, I know kind of what you're looking for based on the history you've provided. This is what you like and the style that you like. And so the hypothesis is kind of like if you are putting in real client information, it is also using that data. It's like, okay, well, we are using this to um, not train like their AI therapist or whatever it is, although I would think that if GPT is starting to hire therapists on their side, they have a bunch of data that they are us like have access to and therefore feel, okay, well, we have all this data. This is a new like business vertical that they can go into. That's all. I don't work for ChatGPT. I don't, but from my understanding, and the way that I've seen kind of OpenAI work, that's what I would kind of conclude. But I wouldn't quote me on it. This is just really from kind of anecdotal experience that in this space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
thank you, Vivian. And good question, Anne. Glad you jumped in there. Curious from you, Anne, when talking with clients about privacy, what does that conversation look like? How do you talk to them about privacy when using AI?
It's a good question. And there are as many responses as there are clients. Some people are like, oh, no problem at all. They don't ask any questions. They're like, oh, I was at my doctor's, my primary care, and they did this too. And maybe for some, it's just becoming more routine, whereas other people have more questions, which I'll be honest, makes me feel good when people question this. Um, and then we talk about it. Well, I'll talk about this later too, but when I guess I have a very specific informed consent for AI use, and I use Blueprint provides a template, and then I have, worked off of that. But the key points that I like to emphasize are HIPAA compliance. And the note taker does record the session, but then it deletes it from everywhere. Um, and one thing that I can tell my clients about Blueprint too is like, I have access to the Slack channel and I know that they delete. Like, there's no sketchy stuff that I sometimes see in like therapist Facebook groups, like, oh, they don't delete, whatever. But it's like, no, these are really, ethics are being followed. And so, yeah, the recordings are automatically deleted. And then there are options too in Blueprint where I don't have to save session transcripts if a client doesn't want me to. There are layers of options around privacy.
Amazing. And when you have an informed consent form, you said, and there's a template that Blueprint provides, and you've built on that. You provide that to the client, of course, before beginning any type of use of AI in the session. Do you have a conversation with them about it actively? Like you bring it up to them, or you wait to see if they have a question for you? What is like the actual dialogue look like if there is one?
It's a good question. It is proactive, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Proactive, open, and I try, as best I try to create a neutral environment where there's no pressure, right? To use this. And then I don't know, sorry, can you please repeat your question?
Yeah, it was just about the dialogue of like,
Oh yeah.
is it proactive or not? And like, what does that look like? Have you had clients push back or ask questions, and what are they?
Yeah, so I never like I have a returning client coming back to me in the next week, and I alluded in the email confirming her session that I now use this thing. Like this is now an option.
Hmm.
But we will talk about it in person. So I'm not going to have the conversation over email. I'm going to wait to make sure that I can see anybody's tone of, or see their body language, see their face, right? Like hear their tone of voice when I'm having the conversation. And then, yeah, like questions are often, because I do see a lot of therapists, it is often around like the fears we talked about earlier. Is this training a model?
Hmm.
That sort of thing, which I can say no, right? Unless it's like your specific case, like it will remember things if we want it to.
Right, as we were talking about earlier. I mean, you have a kind of inside track perspective, a very inside track perspective, and know that the organization you work for, that whose note taker tool you use doesn't train the model, which shines a light on being really informed about the tools you're using, so you can have this conversation proactively with clients about these tools. And it sounds like also it's like a very neutral, honest conversation. There's a lot of optionality for the client, and that you said also it occurs in person, not over email. So you can kind of be in touch more and tune into their reaction and I think imagine not feel pressured to do this.
Right. And if I, sense any hesitation, I'm going to call that out because there is a power dynamic we have to acknowledge, right? Like people want their therapist to like them. They want to say yes for their therapist. And um, I don't, I want to address that proactively. Like I'm going to err on the side of caution, right? I'm going to just say, we won't use it. That's okay.
Yeah.
We can always revisit the conversation. It's not like a set in stone thing.
That's great. I mean, it's just another one of an infinite number of instances where the power dynamic in that dyad presents itself, and great to hear that you're tuned into that as well. This is an example. So I'm hearing proactive, open, honest, neutral, no pressure. Are there other best practices you follow or recommend or consider as you're using or considering using AI in your practice?
Yeah, I'll just share anecdotally. I took my kids to the dentist
Yeah.
appointment this week, and the dentist, so I have three kids. Two of them got seen, no problem. And then on the third one, I noticed that he was using an AI scribe to record his notes. And so I kind of called him out, right? Like in a nice, gentle way, but like he was using it with all three of my kids without any permission, without any acknowledgement. So like I think that that's a very firm boundary. Don't do that. That's a best practice. Like give
Mm.
permission. I do think at some point this will probably become so routine in all sorts of healthcare, but right now it's not. Um, there's a lot of people not comfortable with it. And then the other thing that I'd say for a best practice is use it to your comfort level and
Mm.
really check in with yourself about that. So I know a lot of people start out with like a dictation, a note dictation where you just share whatever happened in the session, your thoughts about it, and then the product will create or the tool will create a note based on that. And I think that that's a wonderful way. Like it doesn't have to be a full session recording or transcript to create the note. It can just be you talking into a recorder or the computer, and then it creates the note for you.
So there's a distinction between the dictation and the full recording. And the point here is like comfort on both sides of the relationship, on both the clinician. Do I feel comfortable recording? If not, do I feel comfortable with dictation? Do I feel comfortable with this tool and their training policies, their security policies of this specific tool I'm choosing? And then on the client side, do they feel comfortable? And that's a
Right.
function of that conversation, that proactive, honest, open conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think there is so much hype around AI, right? And we just want to make sure we're making on both sides thoughtful decisions around the use.
I love that. A lot of hype, a lot of excitement, can save time. We'll get into that in the next couple slides here. That's great, but like, the focus now is of this clinical integrity. Like, how do we make sure we're doing this in a way that we feel both parties comfortable with?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you both for that. Unless there's anything else you want to talk about in terms of clinical integrity, security, or privacy, wanted to shift gears a bit to AI as a partner in practice. And we'll start with you here. And we spoke to this already. The question is about how you introduce AI to clients in a transparent and informed way. You already set the stage a little bit of like it's in person, not over email, it's proactive. Anything else you want to say about how you introduce these options transparently and in an informed way?
I guess, I try to explain what the tool does and what it doesn't do, and also why
Mm,
I use it. It's there to support the clinical work. It really does help me be more present in session. I've noticed that um, you know, and I want to also affirm that the tool is not there to analyze them or me, right? Or replace me, or make decisions about their care. Like I am very much in the driver's seat with them, also making decisions about their care, right? Uh, as two people on the journey together, but definitely we're not relying on AI for that. We just use it as a support, but not as a replacement.
So you described a lot of what it doesn't do. It's not to replace. It doesn't make decisions. And do you frame it like it supports me in being more present with you, or you kind of put it to yourself, or to them, or to you two together as a in the relationship?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think I had never really realized how much I had been formulating the note in my head during a session
Mm.
until I started using Blueprint. And once I did and just started relying on this more, I was like, oh man, I'm really able to just be more present in a way I thought I was before, but it's not like it's not dual attention. It's focused.
Frees up some space.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you had clients who have ever opted out? And if you have, like, how does that go? How do you handle it?
I have had a client say, "Hey, this is going to be a really vulnerable session today. Can we not use it?" I said, "Absolutely. It's very easy to turn off." And then we, had our session, and then the following week and weeks, I, checked back in and on their comfort level of using it a lot. And it was really just for them that one session.
Mm.
That being said, it is an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, and it sounds like from earlier in this conversation that it isn't a point in time conversation. It's ongoing. You make
Correct.
that clear as like it doesn't end today if you say yes or no, or we can always continue to have it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Vivian, from your side, how do you design tools that integrate into therapists' workflows? We're talking about AI as a partner in practice, and there's a design element in building it. What are those considerations for you and your team?
Yeah, so I've worked in a lot of different companies in product and clinical product, sorry, spaces, and there are different ways of incorporating clinicians. I will say for Blueprint, we, as clinicians, you're incorporated from beginning to end, which I have found really helpful in creating products that actually speak to clinicians instead of being pulled in the middle to ask a question and then you kind of are not involved in the design process after. So, Anne can speak to this as well, where clinicians are asked at all from the beginning to end stages of what a clinician's workflow actually is like. And a lot of us start from a blank slate. It's like, we think this is it. Can someone review and let us know if this is true? And this is where, like, kind of, Anne, we were kind of talking about how our different perspectives really are helpful. This is where, for example, the whole consent process, like, how do you actually ask for consent? When I was practicing, AI was not a thing. I am that many years old. And you write your notes, you type your notes, right? Concurrent documentation was still a thing that people pushed. And I just I wouldn't have the real life experience of how I would ask to use the AI scribe in a session as a provider. I've been asked as a client, but not as a provider. And so having that perspective is really helpful. And really making sure that we are partnering with providers in order to create this thing that they feel like they can use as a complementary service, not as a replacement service. It should take over anything that is too much of a mental load for them. Think of your everyday task. Your dishwasher takes care of washing your dishes. It doesn't tell you which dishes to wash, right? So it's kind of the similar perspective of the way that we designed. We want to give you insights on, hey, your dishes are done, take them out, but we're not going to be like, you should do this here and let me start the dishwasher for you.
That's a really good analogy, and good point about like the complementary nature of your and Anne's experience, both clinicians, but Anne practicing now and having the conversations around integrating this technology that you're building into her practice. But you have a foundation, both in compliance, but also working with clients for, I think it was 10 or so years. So you like understand what that workflow, at least, as of a couple years ago, when you transitioned from that role to this one, what that's like. And then integrating what I've heard is like integrating it through and through the design process. It's not just like pulling you in or like asking a question, on a Reddit channel or something, how does this work? It's like you are there building it through and through the whole way, which I imagine shows up in the quality and a lot of decisions along the way in what you create.
I feel like
Amazing.
the thing that we share, Vivian, is this battle scar of having concurrent documentation pushed on us at LA County DMH.
Yeah, so a little bit more background. Anne and I both, well, Anne used to live in California. We both worked for the Department of Mental Health. I worked there for like a decade, and I don't know how long Anne did. And it was a huge movement back then to concurrently document. So, like, document while you're talking to your client, which for a medical doctor might be possible, but as a therapist, I never figured out how to do that.
Right.
So,
Working with a 7-year-old, like trying to write yeah, no. Yeah.
sit still, tell me about your feelings while I.
Wow.
Avatars.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Anything else either of you wants to add on AI as a partner in practice? We're going to get to the next slide is about reducing cognitive load. I think a nice segue from the freeing up some headspace, from concurrent nodes to AI. I mean, the big difference between those two, but anything else on this point here?
No, I just kind of want to reiterate that something I think everybody already knows, but how important it is that you remain in charge of clinical decision making, that any AI tool is a tool. It's not the decision maker. It doesn't have clinical judgment, but you do have training. And always remember that.
Yeah. And to add on to that a little bit, is one of the things that we explore in the whole clinical product and AI series that I do is the whole idea that yes, we rely on the tool for administrative tasks, but there are some who do rely on it for clinical decision making, which is not necessarily the best thing. And what does that mean for the newly trained therapists? And what does that mean for the students that perhaps don't necessarily have as much of the experience that you have over time on getting that without the tool, what that's like. And so it's a really interesting, ever evolving conversation.
Yeah, and we're like it's unfolding in real time. I'm tempted to ask like, what do you think about it? What is the answer? And I'm sure you have thoughts. I'd love to hear them. And also, it's developing in real time. Like, the technology today is very different than it was 2 or 3 years ago, even. So students today are having a very different experience than students 2 or 3 years ago. Um, but I hear you about like the critical thinking and that's kind of like the tip of the spear of, is this replacing or is it supporting clinicians? Allowing is this facilitating a clinician to like be more present and be more fully engaged, or is it taking something off their place and now they can check out?
Yeah, I feel like that's a whole other series because it's related to what trainings we went through as therapists, right? And how that has to differ and how does AI impact the skills that we are trained as a therapist today? Meaning you should start introducing it in training, right? But should we be shifting focus more on skills, knowing AI is going to be a complementary partner? So then we sharpen skills around that as opposed to focusing on documentation, for example. Not that school ever trained you how to document for insurance, but if it did.
It's a really good point. I'm hearing like shifting landscape as we've acknowledged, and it's a how how it's implemented, how we're training around it, for example.
It's not for
Right.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that it's so important for people in academia and the practicum supervisors to be able to speak about this and to this clinical supervisors because I think we'd all agree like some of our best training comes from suffering is the only word I'm thinking of, like being in those moments that are just really hard and we have to figure out how to get through them, right? And that's human to human. There's nothing different we can do about that or that we could change or that we would want to change. But I think what concerns me the most is when therapists have the opinion of like, oh, just like all AI is bad, or it's just like this sort of extreme view that's like, it's nowhere near me. I don't want it anywhere near me. Because that's not, in my opinion, reasonable, especially if you're training the next wave of therapists.
Mm.
That at some point this probably will be routine. Like the landscape is changing so fast and we do have to keep up.
This is the same as when we moved from paper charts to EHR. And there was a camp of people, I don't trust EHRs. I'm going to handwrite all my notes because I know exactly where it is.
Yeah.
And the people that, okay, we're going to, EHRs kind of stay. It's kind of a similar, what is this mountain that we're kind of climbing right now?
It's another great analogy.
Yeah. And I want to acknowledge there was a question too about like, can you use it only for treatment plans? And yeah, I think the point is too, is right now using it at your own pace, um, or not at all, but thank you for being here and at least like learning about it, because that's really important.
It's a good segue. We've talked a lot about cognitive load, presence, and begun to have the discussion here that we're teeing up. Pros and cons, and like the very specific difference between supporting and replacing a therapist. Um, and I want to start with you. Can you share a time when AI surfaced something clinically meaningful you hadn't fully registered? Maybe an example of like, oh, this tool caught something that like it was a helpful to bring it into my forefront.
Yeah. I don't know if I can share this from Blueprint's perspective, but I'm going to. But I've been using the EHR, and there's a new EHR feature which is an assistant, and I typed into it something about safety issues, and I really thought, oh, this client doesn't have safety issues, right? Like none that I'd really be concerned about. And the product came back like some really significant, like, oh yeah, they did have a friend recently who was expressing suicidal ideation. They did have this experience previously, and it was really mind-blowing and also super helpful just to, yeah, sometimes maybe I don't know if I feel too comfortable because I have this relationship with the client, but reading that list that was created gave me a sense of I don't know, like clinical professional distance in a way. That I don't know if that makes sense. I don't want to make it seem like I don't have clinical professional distance in my practice, but just a different perspective. It was very helpful.
It's kind of like zooming out, like zooming out and giving you the bigger picture and things that maybe when you're in it, you don't necessarily see. It's kind of like it reminds me of that post that you wrote about the episode in The Bear about seeing family dynamics, the zooming out and seeing like the family dynamics of a client and their family, and how that oftentimes from the outside looking in, you can pinpoint certain things. Whereas like when you're in it, you're kind of in it. That's kind of what
Yes.
it's reminding me
Thank you. That's a lovely metaphor. Yes.
Well said, Vivian. Here with the metaphors. And I remember
I
that
know. Well done.
remember that post on LinkedIn too, Anne. Really insightful, zoom out of family systems from the show The Bear. Um, Vivian, switching gears a little bit here, curious about insurance, everyone's favorite topic. How does AI help with documenting medical necessity and functional impairment for insurance?
Yeah. So documenting for insurance is not second nature to a lot of us. It's putting something into a specific set of words that insurance people deem as acceptable.
Hmm.
I've worked as a QA specialist training specifically people on how to document, like all the new trainees on how to document in order to make sure insurance doesn't claw back. And I've also worked as an insurance auditor. I've also worked in like other places to audit for insurance auditors. That being said, the way that so all of that knowledge is kind of applied to a lot of our prompt writing and a lot of blueprints, note templates, and things like that. And the AI is really good at taking something you say that is perhaps not very eloquent, and making it into a very specific statement that you need it to be. So let's say the functional impairment has to be written in a certain way, like they have impairments at work, they have impairments in school, whatever it is. But in the everyday conversation, client or yourself is not going to say, I am functionally impaired at work. I am functionally impaired at school. But the AI through the conversation is able to understand that, okay, well, your grades are declining because of your depressive symptoms, or you're not showing up to work because you are in bed all day. And that is a functional impairment. So it's able to tease those out and put it in a way that insurance will accept and understand why these are medically necessary.
Translation into a language that insurance accepts.
Exactly. It makes it
Amazing.
sound really smart and like you're writing insurance notes.
Thank you for that. Going to be mindful of the clock here. We're almost up against time, so going to go through a few more topics pretty quickly. And we have one more poll, or two more polls, I think. I can launching here. Biggest pain points without AI. What is your biggest pain point in your work without AI tools? What are you struggling most with? We have a couple more slides. We might get to a few more of these topics. We have finishing notes, billing claims and insurance. On the note of insurance, staying present with clients during a session. How big of a pain point is that for you without AI? Tracking client progress between sessions, feeling unprepared for upcoming sessions. Can they give just 10 more seconds maybe? Looks like most folks have participated. And by far and away, the writing and finishing notes as the biggest pain point without AI. Very helpful share there and good framing for the next topic of conversation. We're going to rip right through this. We have just a few minutes left, but wanted to touch on the Therapeutic Alliance. And how do you think AI can strengthen and not weaken the Therapeutic Alliance?
Yeah, I spoke earlier about just being more present and not really realizing how much of my mental space had been taken up with, oh, this is the note I need to write because I need to write that note within the, 7 minutes between session. Um, and so there's that. I know one of the common, you know, how do I say this? Things against the AI is, oh, I won't reflect. And I think that reflecting, it's as therapists, right? It's the time that we have with the client, and then it's also the time outside of session that impacts our relationship. And so, in terms of like being able to reflect back on the session and back on the relationship, I do still very much reflect outside of session on, this moment or what happened in the session, what do I want to do next session, that sort of thing, which I do think promotes, that will always be there if as you're a human and you think about people that you care about between sessions. And then the last thing I was going to say was the preparation. It has been so helpful to have a summary or just like bullet points of the last what I
Mm,
need to cover. This is what you talked about in the last session, and these are some suggestions for what you might do today. Before in the minutes before that I see the client that like previously I'd have to go back into the chart and then read the note, and most of the time I didn't have time for that. But this is just like automatic. It is so helpful. So that way we just jump right back in. I think it was like Yalom who talked about, right, trying to create continuous sessions.
mm.
Um, and so that's been really impactful in a way that I wouldn't have thought.
Very helpful. And Vivian, in 30 seconds or less, because we're up against the clock here, any thoughts on Therapeutic Alliance and how you're designing the tools to support clinical judgment and not replace it? Thinking about suggested interventions or assessments here in particular.
Yeah, so echoing kind of everything Anne said, we also make sure that when we suggest interventions and assessments they are only based off of that current and the previous transcript, so that it is only based on the content that you have shared, and it won't suggest anything that is outside of what we think are within safe limits. So anyone under 13, we have certain guardrails around like risk behaviors because we don't feel we can confidently suggest that because we're just missing so much context. Anytime we don't have that context, we will probably not suggest, which is why you have to set up your clients in certain ways in order to get suggestions if you do enroll in like the plus for Blueprint.
Vivian, with some more guardrails. Appreciate that. Thank you for keeping us all safe. And we're winding down here. We have the QR codes that we had flashed at the beginning of the presentation. Again, on the left, there's a special offer for 50% off for new users for the next 30 days. The offer is available for the next 30 days. And on the right, if you're interested in connecting with other therapists in private practice for connection or tips, or more webinars like this, or likely we'll be hosting another free case consultation group up in the new year. Please join us in the community. It's called Between Sessions. You can access it and sign up by scanning the QR code here on the right. And Vivian, any last closing thoughts or reflections from the last hour together?
This was really fun. Thanks for having me.
This was fun. I feel like I learned a lot. I got a lot of new metaphors to use, so I really appreciate that. And I do really appreciate everyone showing up because this is such an important conversation. These, conversations are just expanding on what the topics are looking like. I know Paul put some great points in there about like, yeah, we do need research and it will be interesting to see how this all shapes in the next few years. And I think as we're shaping it, we just need to be very mindful and thoughtful. So thank
Well
you all for
said.
being here.
Thank you, Anne. It is a quickly shifting landscape, and we are, all of us, taking a role in shaping it, by being here, by using it or not in our practice. So thank you both, Vivian and Anne, for joining, and for everyone else who joined. The presentation recording will be available soon. Join us in the community for the slides and for future opportunities just like this. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.